Hello guys and welcome back to the Minecraft mod tutorial. In today's episode we are going to be doing JEI compatibility. This is just enough items, which is a mod that shows you all the recipes for all items in lots and lots of different mods. So we're going to be creating our own plugin today to make all our recipes work. First things first, to install the JEI API into your mod, you're going to want to go into your build.gradle, and I will leave a link in the description to the stuff you have to copy in. I'm copying from the JEI website, and just below this Minecraft here, paste it in. So you have your repositories, which is the location of the JEI files, as well as these dependencies. As you can see, it's referencing $MC version and $JEI version, and this is referring to our gradle.w.properties file. So inside of gradle.properties file, you're going to want to add two different properties: MC version equals 1.12.2 and JEI underscore version equals, and then go on to the Just Enough Items Curse Forward website, go into files, and the latest release version is 4.8.5.159 for me. So that's the latest release, so give that a save. Then go into command prompt, go to CD, and then copy this path, and then run gradle.w setup decomp workspace. And then run gradle.w eclipse once you finish with that. And then we're finished. Go into Eclipse and click F5 to refresh. Then go into reference libraries and you'll see JEI 1.12.2 is installed. So that will allow all of the default recipes to work, but we're going to have to create our own plugin to make our Sintra work, or any other type of custom furnace or crafting table you've made. So we're going to want to go into source main Java, harry.mod, util, and then the compatibility package. And I'm going to create a new package called JEI, as this is going to require quite a few classes. The first class we're going to create is the JEI integration class. So JEI Compat is what I'm going to call it. This is going to implement iMod plugin, and also it's going to have the annotation of @JEI plugin. There's going to be a couple of things, so register categories, register, and then a couple of our own functions that we're going to create. So public static string translate to local string key, and then if I18n dot can translate key return I18n dot translate to local key. This will cross all this out, but it's necessary. Else return I18n dot translate to fallback key, and then one more, public static translate to local formatted string key object formatted, public static string. Then we're going to want string s equals, and then we're going to call the function we just created, translate to local key, and then we're going to use a try catch, try return string dot format s format catch illegal format exception e return format error colon space then plus s. That'll be used later. Next we are going to create a class called recipe categories, and this is going to just be public static final string, and then the name of your category. So these recipes I'm going to be creating are for the Sinterer, so I'm going to call it Sinterer. And this is going to be equal to your mod ID, reference.mod ID, plus, and then in here, dot Sinterer. You can also create things, you can also create multiple categories for different machines that you may have in your mod. Then back to JEI compatibility. Inside of the register categories, we're going to have final JEI helpers equals registry dot get JEI helpers, final GUI helper GUI equals helpers dot get GUI helper, and then registry dot add recipe categories new Sinterer recipe category GUI. So now we've done them, those two will be used for all different things. I'm going to create another package specifically for the Sinterer. Create a new class called abstract Sinterer recipe category, and check the abstract, and then this you put triangle brackets T extends I recipe wrapper and implements I recipe category T. We're then going to need to have our 4 slots that are in our Sinterer, a protected static final int for each of them, like so. So I'm going to go and create 3 more. And then also 3 more GUI elements. Protected final drawable static for the flame. Then another protected final drawable animated for the animated flame. And then 1 more protected final drawable animated for the arrow. We are then going to need the constructor, which has an GUI helper. We're going to set the static flame equal to helper dot create drawable textures, and then these are the locations of the drawable. So 176 0, because that's where the flame actual starts, and it's 14 wide and 14 tall. We're going to come back to those textures in a minute. Then the animated flame is equal to helper dot create animated drawable from the static flame. Int ticks per cycle, this is how fast it goes. The bit larger the number, the slower it will actually go. I'm going to put 300. The start direction, drawable static animated dot start direction dot top and inverted true. So it starts on the top and then goes downwards, so the flame is running out. Then drawable static arrow equals helper dot create drawable textures 176 14, that's where the arrow starts, 24 wide and 17 tall. Animated flame equals helper dot create animated drawable static arrow 200 ticks per cycle, drawable animated dot start direction dot left, and it just goes towards the right, so it's false on the inverted. Then these textures obviously refer to our sintering furnace background. So protected static final resource location textures equals a new resource location, reference.modEdi plus colon textures slash GUI slash sintering furnace .png. So you can save that. So we now have our inputs, all our slots declared, all our GUI elements declared, and now that was an abstract class, we can actually create the Sintra recipe category. It's going to extend abstract Sintra recipe category, and it's going to be a Sintra recipe, which we're going to create in a bit. This is where we're going to actually draw the GUI. So a private final iDrawable called the background, and private final string name. We are then going to create the constructor, which wants the iGUI helper, super off of the helper. Then we're going to set the background equals helper dot create drawable. The textures, obviously that's the background. It's going to start about 4 inwards, so we have actually avoid the edge drawing, and also 12 down. And I'm not going to draw the entire 256 by 256. I'm going to draw 150 across and 60 down. These are numbers I've already tested, so with your GUI it may be different and you may need to adjust some of these things. It took me quite a while to actually figure out those numbers. And then name is just going to be a string sintering furnace. Then get background, we're just going to return background. Then draw extras. This is where we're going to draw the flame and the arrow. Animated flame dot draw, and then this will be a offset of where they're moving. I've already adjusted these values, so 4 and 42, but these may be different for you. And then animated arrow dot draw, Minecraft 40 and 23 for me, but once again these may vary. Get title will be the name. Get mod name, we're just going to return reference dot name. Get UID, we're going to return the recipe category, recipe categories dot Sintra. And then set recipe, this is where we're going to define how a recipe works. Set recipe, you can remove a lot of this mes.jei stuff and just Control Shift O to import everything. First things first, iGUI item stack group. These are going to be all the stacks that we use the recipe. Call it stacks is equal to recipe layout dot get item stacks, then stacks dot init. So we're going to have input 1. This is an input, so return true. Then the location of this, I'm going to do 21 and 2, as I've already measured out these values. Then stacks dot init input 2. This is an input, and the values are 21 and 42. And then stacks.init. This is going to be the output slot. This is not going to be an input, and its location is 76 and 23. And then stacks.set to the ingredients. I also made a few tiny modifications to the GUI, so I'm going to bring my new modified version in. So now, as you can see, it has a tiny little coal logo for where the fuel goes, and I've moved the slot closer together so that it all fits on one category and it looks proper. I now have to create the Sintra recipe, so create that class. This is going to implement an iRecipe wrapper. Then we're going to need a private final list of item stack called inputs, a private final item stack called output, and Control-Shift-O, import java.util.list, then create the constructor. In here we're going to have list of item stack inputs and item stack out. This.inputs equals input and this.output equals output. We are then going to get ingredients. This is just where we set the inputs and the output. So ingredients dot set inputs item stack dot class. As JEI does also support liquid inputs, and then ingredients dot set output item stack dot class and the output. And then finally draw info. So it's going to draw how much XP this gives. We are going to get the sintering furnace recipes equals the instance. Then the amount of experience is float. Experience is equal to recipes dot get sintering experience for the output. If the experience is greater than 0, so if experience is given to the player, the string we're going to draw, string experience string equals JEI Compat dot translate to local formatted GUI dot JEI dot category dot smelting dot experience, and then experience is what you're going to write. Then font renderer is Minecraft.font renderer. Then int string width is renderer.get string width of the string. And then finally renderer.draw string, the experience string. The x value is going to be recipe width, take away string width. The y value is going to be 0. And the colour can be whatever you want, but I'm going to go with colour.grey.getRGB. And that is the Sintero recipe done, as well as the Sintero recipe category. Then Control-Shift-O inside of JEI Compat to get that. The final class is going to be Sintero recipe maker. It's going to have one function, public static list of Sintero recipe called get recipes, with JEI helpers, then stack helper called stack helper is helpers.getStackHelper. The sintering furnace recipes, we're going to get the instance again. We are again going to create a table for the recipes. Table of item stack called recipes is instance.get dual smelting list, and make sure it's com.google.table. And then finally list of Sintero recipe called JEI recipes. These are the recipes that have been registered. Is lists.newArrayList. We are then going to do something similar to the actual sintering recipes class for entry of item stack and a map of item stack called entry sintering recipes dot column map dot entry set for entry of item stack entry dot get value. Control-Shift-O to import everything. You want com.google.multiset and java.util.map. Entry.getValue.entrySet. This entry actually needs to be a java.util.map.entry. That'll make everything work. And then inside of here, we are going to have the item stack. Input 1 is equal to entry.getKey. So this item stack here is input 1. Then item stack input 2 equals ent.getKey. So the second input is this item stack here. And then finally the output ent.getValue. It's this item stack here. Then next, a list of item stack called inputs is lists dot new array list with input 1 and input 2. Then the actual recipe, Cintra recipe equals a new Cintra recipe inputs and the output. And then finally JEI recipes dot add recipe return JEI recipes. So I'm going to go through this again to make sure you understand. We just get a couple of helpers at the start. We get an instance of all our recipes that we created during the Cintra tutorial. We then get the table, including 2 inputs and an output, that we get from the list of things inside of Sintering Furnace recipes. And then we create a list of recipes that are going to be registered to just enough items. We then go through a for loop where we get each of the items, so the 2 inputs and the output, and then we declare them here. We then create a list with both inputs in it, as that is what Cintra recipe wants. It wants a list of input and an output. And then we add that recipe to the register recipes, and we return the list. So now that is done. Inside the register function, firstly we have to declare a few variables. So final, an I ingredient registry called ingredient registry equals registry.get ingredient registry. Then final, I JEI helpers called the JEI helpers is registry.get JEI helpers. And then finally, the I recipe transfer registry called recipe transfer equals recipe registry.get recipe transfer registry. So what are these 3 variables? There is the ingredient registry, which registers all items that are used inside of JEI recipes. There's the helpers, which are just functions that help you while working with JEI. And there's the recipe transfer recipe registry, which is when, if you are in a machine and you are looking at its recipes, you can click the little plus button in the corner if you have all the ingredients, and it will place all the ingredients inside of that machine to start the recipe going. If that makes sense, I'll explain it when we actually get into the game. Then we are going to have to add the recipes. Registry.add recipes. We want a collection of recipes, so we want Cintra recipe maker dot get recipes, the JEI helpers, and then with the recipe category of the Cintra. So we've now added the recipes to JEI. We now need registry.add recipe click area. This is a place inside of your machine where you can click and it will show you all recipes inside of that machine that are registered to JEI. So we want the GUI class first, GUI Sintering Furnace .class, the X position 110 for me at least, the Y position of 0, the width of 50, and the height of 50, and the recipe category of Cintra. Finally, we're going to add a recipe transfer dot add recipe transfer handler. We want the container class. We want the registry categories, the Cintra, 0, 1, 3, 36. If we hover over this, those things are actually slots. So the recipe slots start. So there's 0. Slot 0 is the first input. The recipe slot count is just the other input, so there's only 1. The inventory slot start is slot 3 is the first inventory. And then the slot count for the inventory, there's 36 in the inventory. There's 9 by 3 for the inventory section and 9 by 1 for the hotbar, adding up to make 36. And once that is finished, JEI Your sinterer should now work with JEI. So here we are in Minecraft and we have my sintering furnace. If we look at my GUI here and we hover over this box, it says show recipes. If I click, it will come up with the JEI recipe that I have with my copper dust. This is something in my Machine Mania mod that I'm demonstrating here because my other mod isn't up to date with 1.12.2. If we on the right here, if we scroll over, we have a few of my items, and if we click on it, if we click on a copper ingot, we can see I smelt dust into the ingot, as I've registered that smelting recipe. The crafting recipe for my sintering furnace will show up as crafting, so just enough items is fully implemented into our mod. So thanks for watching, guys. If you have found this useful, please leave a like down below, and subscribe to the channel for more. Thanks for watching, my name has been Harry, and goodbye.